Hey guys, Metasploit here, back again with another video, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to install Kali Linux on a virtual machine, more specifically how to install it on VMware workstation or whatever version that you're using. Now again, a lot of you guys have been requesting for this, and I do understand that I've only made one Kali Linux installation video, and it's about time I update it. So I'm going to be showing you how to install it on a virtual machine, more specifically VMware right now. And then in future videos regarding installation, I'm going to show you how to install it on VirtualBox. And then finally how to install it on a flash drive. And then the installation process or the steps are pretty much the same. So let's get started. So the first thing you want to do obviously is to go ahead and download your Kali Linux ISO. Alright, now I'm going to be using, you can just open up any browser that you're currently using. I'm going to assume that you're using Windows or Mac OS or even Linux, depending on whether or not you want to virtualize it or not. Again, it's all up to you. As I said, the installation process is pretty much the same. So essentially what you have to do is just search for Kali Linux, right, in your search engine, whatever search engine you feel is necessary or is good for you. So just give it a quick search, and I don't know why mine is taking so much time. There we are. All right. So the first link, that's the one you want to hit. It's going to say Kali Linux penetration testing and ethical hacking Linux distribution. Awesome. Click on it. All right. So just give it a few seconds to load up. Of course, your internet connection might be much faster than mine. And on the home page, it's just going to tell you our most advanced penetration testing distribution ever. All right, now it's going to give you the latest release. Now, as of this video, the latest release is 2017.3, and I will be updating it if necessary and if I feel that the changes need to be made. Anyway, you can go through all of this and you can look at the blog and the change log, or the logs that are that give information about the changes or updates that have been made. So since we want to get this installed, what we would do is go to downloads and just click on that, and it's hopefully going to open up the downloads page. And there we are. So download Kali Linux images. All right. So right here, essentially Kali Linux is going to be separated into different types of images depending on customization. For example, you have your different architectures. You have your 32-bit and 64-bit. You then have your light versions, which are, well, are light versions of Kali Linux. Simply put, you then have your different versions with your different desktop environments. That's if you do not enjoy the GNOME desktop environment that it comes already pre-installed with. So you can choose your Mate, your XFCE or LXDE. And there's also the AMREL and your ARM HF. All right. So in terms of that's in terms of desktop environment. So you can have a fair choice of whatever you feel is good for you. When it comes down to your VMware virtual machines, you can actually download this. These are already virtual machine files that allow you to just open them up without installing Kali Linux. That's good for you. Again, you might just want to skip through the process. All you have to do is just download it. But if you're downloading the ISO and you want to learn how to install it the correct way and how to configure it, just select one of these ones. Again, make sure to get the architecture right. I'm using 64-bit, and you can choose to download it using HTTP or torrent. I do it through torrent because, again, many times I'm not going to just download it directly because I forget I've downloaded it, and I just want something running in the background that can download the latest versions for me. All right, so I already have mine downloaded and it's on my desktop. So once it's downloaded, you just want to have it somewhere handy. In my case, I have it on my desktop. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my VMware, which is right here. So I'm using Workstation 14 Pro. The installation process shouldn't be any different if you have updated it to the latest version. But overall, the process should be quite likewise to yours, even if you're using an older version. All right, so it's going to take you to the home section here, and it's going to give you three options. So you want to create a new virtual machine. All right, so new virtual machine, and it's going to say what type of configuration do you want. Now, I would recommend to just use the typical, which is recommended. if you're a beginner. You really don't need to tinker with anything about, anything in the custom or advanced section in terms of configuration. So just hit typical. All right. So then it's going to ask you for the installer disk, which is essentially a funny name of a funny way of saying where's your ISO. Now, as I said, mine is stored on my desktop in my Kali Linux folder, like so. And I'm just going to select the ISO file. So make sure you select that, and I'm going to hit open. And it's going to tell you could not detect which operating system is in the disk image. Don't worry about that. All right. So just hit next. What you want to do now is select the guest operating system. Now this is pretty self-explanatory. Here you just specify what your operating system is based on. Ours is going to be based on Linux. So make sure to select that. And then it's going to ask you for the version. Now for the version, you can essentially just specify that you want other Linux 3.x or 3. Anything or later kernel. Depending on your architecture, you can select the 64-bit or the 32-bit. All right, so make sure it's 3 and above. Now, usually what other people would go for is something with Debian, but that seems to give people a lot of errors when it comes when it comes down to configuring the virtual or the VMware tools, the guest edition tools as well. So make sure you select other Linux 3 or later kernel 64-bit. That's the version. Hit next. All right, now you want to give your virtual machine a name. I'm just going to call mine test virtual machine Kali. All right, because I already have mine installed, I don't need to do it again. So the location is pretty much wherever you want. I'm going to save mine on my desktop. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to rename this. Let me just rename that to Kali test. All right, so this is where I'm going to store all the files related, all the virtual machine files for this virtual machine. So Kali test, hit OK. Again, you can save it to wherever you want or wherever you feel is comfortable. Hit next. Now in here, you can specify the virtual hard drive space that you want to give your virtual machine. Again, it's all up to you. If you're using your virtual machine for a lot of stuff and you anticipate that you're going to be having a lot of files, you can specify as much as you want, as much as you have on your hard drive. For me, I use it for pen testing, and I'm not saving huge files at all. I'm usually just, again, performing pen testing. So mine, I would keep it about 20 gigabytes. If I need to go anything higher, a maximum of 50, and that's pretty much good for me. All right, so then you have the option of splitting the virtual disk into multiple files, and it'll tell you why. It's going to say splitting the disk makes it easier to move the virtual machine to another computer, but may reduce performance with very large disks. Now, usually I stay away from splitting it. I like keeping all my virtual machines in one disk in a single file, because most of the time, if you're trying to copy your virtual machine files, there's a chance of corruption. And once that happens, you cannot troubleshoot at all. You cannot restore, or you can't take snapshots from a corrupted, if one of them is corrupted, you can't get the complete snapshot. So I hope you guys get an idea of what I'm talking about. So just hit next. All right, now it's going to ask you, it's going to give you the option to customize your hardware. Again, this is something very, very specific to what you want and how you want to configure it. I usually keep my memory for Kali Linux at about 2 gigabytes. Again, I have 8 gigabytes on this computer. That's how much RAM I have, physical RAM I have installed. So I usually specify about 2 gigabytes for my Kali Linux virtual machine. That's about good enough for me. All right, when it comes down to processors, I like keeping that. I have a quad-core processor, so I like giving Kali Linux 2 processors, but it can work just fine with 1. Again, it just really depends on you. When it comes down to my display, I like having my display accelerate 3D graphics. I like to have that enabled. And because I have a dedicated graphics card, a 2 GB or a 2 gigabyte dedicated graphics card, I like specifying the recommended amount, which is 768 megabytes. All right, so make sure you select that, or again, select whatever you feel is appropriate for you. If you have an integrated graphics card, the dedicated memory will probably hover between 64 and 128. So make sure you choose between 32-bit and 128 megabyte. 32 megabytes and 128 megabytes. All right, so I'll keep mine at 768 megabytes. Okay, So once that's done, you can then head over to your network adapter, and you can select if you want to bridge, you want it to connect directly to the physical network, or you want to share your host IP address. I like keeping it on NAT. All right. So once that's done, you're pretty much good to go. You can specify other stuff like your USB controllers and other options like that, but that's all up to you. Once that's done, you just hit close and hit finish. All right. So once you hit finish, it's going to open the virtual machine for you. There we are. And what we want to do now is power on our virtual machine. There are two ways of doing this: from the left tab right here and from the top toolbar. So startup or power on. I'm going to power mine on, and there we are. VMware is powering on, and we will now be moving into the bootloader for Kali Linux. There we are, and it's going to give you options. Now, a lot of people here have issues with this. Now, let me explain what these options do. When it says live, this is essentially allowing you to run Kali Linux live for means of you getting a good idea of what the operating system is and how it works. So you're not installing anything. It's just allowing you to run the operating system live. Maybe you want to check out how it works, how it looks, how it feels. Usually this is for people who are new to Kali and want to see how it will operate on their hardware, stuff like that. You then have your persistence mode, which allows you to save files. All right, so you have your live USB persistent mode, which is again a way of you running it live without installing it. So it's essentially going to run off your installation media. So if you had installed Kali Linux on a USB flash drive and you specified a persistence file or you specified a storage amount for persistence, you could actually run Kali Linux off the flash drive. And you can also save files as well. So that's pretty awesome. Now, a lot of people, make a mistake of going into install, not understanding that is going to be the command line interface. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're a beginner, that can be really, really intimidating and you can feel discouraged really, really quickly. So I recommend going for the graphical install. So just hit graphical install and just give it a few seconds to start up. Shouldn't take that too much time at all. There we are. We're getting it's mounting the storage device. Don't worry if you get a few errors here and there. It should start up just fine. There we are. So it's going to start up, and here is the installation page. So it's going to ask you, the first step is to select a language. Now, Kali Linux has a wide collection or a wide support for languages, so you can select whatever you feel is comfortable for you. Again, it's all up to you. So I'm gonna select mine as English. It's then gonna ask you for your location. You can specify whatever you want. I like just keeping mine United States, not because I live there. And then it's gonna ask you for your keyboard. Now, again, a lot of people here make the mistake of choosing their native keyboard layout, and then that messes up with Kali and the keyboard shortcuts. So just please, if you're gonna try and install scripts and stuff that have key maps already installed or already configured, just make sure you go with the American English keyboard configuration. It's really not that hard to learn and understand. All right, so I'm going to hit continue. Now it's going to start detecting it's going to detect the ISO file and then load the installation components from the ISO file. Now, usually a lot of people here get an error when they are trying to install it with a USB flash drive. They get the error that the files could not be read. Now, there are two things that are happening here. Number one is that you're using a USB 3 port, which is really not very friendly when it comes down to Kali Linux. And number two, the fact that you're using UEFI instead of legacy. All right. Now, again, to fix that issue, what you should do is just unplug your USB flash drive while it's on this screen and just plug it back in and hit retry. As soon as you do that, it should start loading up the files immediately. All right. So it's going to ask you to configure the network, and it's going to ask you for your host name for the system. Now, what this is the name or your username on the network. So, if you have a home network, if you have a LAN network or on your Wi-Fi, how do you want your virtual machine or your computer to be known as? Again, you can specify it. I'll just call mine Kali test workstation. All right. So because I usually have many virtual machines running, I need a good host name so that I can differentiate them. All right, so I'm just going to hit continue. Now it's going to ask for your domain name. Now this is, you really don't need to specify this if you're a beginner. This is just a domain name and you can specify to whatever you want. Like for me, I can just say hackersploit.com and that would be my domain name. So this is when you create a domain name for a group of your computers. I'm sure most of you guys know what it is, so you don't have to specify anything there. You can specify whatever you want. Now it comes down to passwords. You have to provide a root password. So I'm just going to provide mine right here, like so. Let me just get rid of that. And there we are. So it's gonna, you can just specify root password, hit continue, and then it's going to ask you for a, it's going to ask you to configure the clock and the time zone, right? Which is awesome. So I'm just going to select central, hit continue. And we should be moving to the next step of the installation. So it's going to start loading the additional components, and it's going to load up the disk partitioner. Now, again, I'll be showing you how to do this when installing it on a, on a physical computer, but I can just give you some tips. Right now, when it comes down to dual booting, I'm assuming that you've already created a separate partition. Now, if you've done that, you want to identify that partition, and you should know the its exact space, its exact size in gigabytes or terabytes, whatever you have specified. Now, what I would recommend is going for the guided use entire disk. But again, if you've created a second partition and you're doing a dual boot, you can select manual. All right, and hit continue, and it's going to ask you to select your storage device. All right, in my case, I only have one, which is the virtual hard drive that I created. If you're doing this on a virtual machine, it's pretty much simple. Just hit finish partitioning and write changes to disk. All right, you can then also go through guided partitioning, which will allow you to partition accordingly and to specify how the files are installed and the file systems are installed. So for us, on virtual machines, what you have to do is just hit finish partitioning, and if it gives you this error, this is basically because you have not specified your storage device, and hit continue, and it's going to say create an empty partition table on this device. So that's what you would do if you're running this, if you're trying to install this on a physical machine. Now going back to partitioning the disks, we can essentially just say guided partitioning. Let's just do that right now, and I want to go to guided, use the entire disk. That's what I would recommend for beginners. Hit continue. It's going to ask you to select the disk to partition. Again, in our case, we only have our storage device A, which is a VMware virtual disk. Hit continue, and now it's going to ask you for your partitioning scheme. Now what this means is it's going to ask you if you want to partition all your home var and your temp partitions or your temporary partitions into separate partitions. Now for beginners, I would recommend that you do this in one partition, because again, I'll be explaining what these other partitions are for. They basically separate the user from the system files, which is what you would see mostly on Windows. But for now, just hit all files in one partition. And again, it's recommended for new users, so just hit continue, and you can just hit finish partitioning and write changes to disk, and it's going to ask you to confirm that. So I'm going to hit yes, hit continue, and it's going to start formatting the partitions, and it's going to start installing the system. Now this will probably take a while, so what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to get back to you when it's done. So I'll see you then. Alrighty, so once it's done with the installation process, it's going to ask you to configure the package manager. So it's going to ask you firstly to select a network mirror. Now I don't want to use a network mirror. This is just a way of asking you to check for new updates. Again, if you're using an outdated ISO, this could be your chance to update the sources and obviously then upgrade your distro. So I'm not going to use a network mirror. I'm just going to hit continue, and then it's going to start configuring the package manager. So just give it a few seconds to start up, and we should get the screen immediately. Don't worry if it takes a bit of time. This section usually takes quite a while to load the package manager, and then you move on to installing the grub bootloader, which is the last step. Alright, so it's installing the grub bootloader, and then it's configuring the it's already configured the package managers. Now it's moving on to the grub bootloader. So just let this install, and again I'll get back to you once this is done. Alrighty, so it's gonna ask you where you want to install the grub bootloader. Alright, now for us, we want to install the grub bootloader on the hard disk, pretty obviously, and then it's gonna ask you whether you want to install it on the master boot record. For a beginner, just I want you to just make sure you select yes. If you hit no, it's going to ask you to specify another location, and then if you specify another location, you don't have another partition, which is why for a beginner I would specify that you just go through the into the master boot record. Now what this means is that if you are trying to dual boot, alright, if it was to install it on the master boot record, it means that the Kali bootloader, the grub bootloader, would be the primary bootloader. And I've seen, I'm pretty sure most of you have seen that when you did when you did a dual boot, it was the Kali bootloader that came up first, that allowed you to select Windows or Kali as the operating system of choice. And then once you made your selection, it would boot into either one of them. So again, just make sure you hit yes and hit continue, and it's going to ask you for the device. Of course, ours is the storage device A. So I'm going to hit continue, and it's going to continue installing the grub bootloader. So I'll get back to you when this is complete. Alrighty, so once it's finished with the installation, it's going to ask you to boot into your new system, and that's what we want to do. So I'm just going to hit continue, and it's going to finish the installation. So it's going to get rid of the live packages because we don't need them anymore, and this shouldn't take too much time at all. Now, before we move on to the next step, guys, I just want to inform you guys of our channel sponsor, or the channel sponsor. So the channel sponsor is Pure VPN. If you're interested in one of the best VPN services around, make sure to check them out. The link will be in the description. You can use my affiliate link to support the channel. So yeah, they offer the best VPN services, and you should check them out. The link is in the description. Please go and check it out and let me know what you guys think. Alrighty, so the Kali installation is still just finishing, and we'll just give that we'll just give that time, and I'll hit you guys when it's ready. Alrighty, so once the installation is complete, it's going to automatically restart into our fresh operating system. So it's going to start the booting process. So it's going to load our storage device, and as you can see, it has successfully loaded that, and it's going to start all the services that are required, and you'll see them starting up right now. Again, just give it a few seconds. The first startup is a bit slow, but we should be good. We should be good to go. Alright, so again, just give it a few seconds, and in a while you'll see that the cursor starts appearing, and that means that it's loaded all the main components. There we are. So that means everything's good. Okay, we're almost ready to begin, and we can then move on to configuring VMware tools with Kali. That'll essentially mean that VMware is running at its maximum efficiency and proficiency with Kali. Alright, so we have successfully booted into Kali. This is great, awesome. Everything looks like it's working. Now by default, if you haven't created a user, which you could not have in the installation process, the default username, the default username is going to be root. Alright, and the password is the root password that you had set. In my case, I know what it is. Make sure you remember that and hit sign in, and it's going to take a few seconds to sign in, and just give it that much time, and we should be good. Everything should be loaded, and that will be awesome. Alright, so once the operating system loads, as you can see, it's going to be pretty weird because the aspect ratio and the resolution is going to be low. So the first thing you want to do is you might want to start by configuring your display. Now usually, if you had not installed the VMware tools, you would not be able to enter full screen into the full screen mode correctly, and the resolution options would be limited to a very, very weird aspect ratio. Now I'm just gonna change mine to I usually like keeping mine at 1600 by 1200. or I keep it at 1920 by 1200 until I can install VMware tools, which is what I'm going to show you how to do now. So I'm just going to apply that resolution. I'm going to hit keep changes. Awesome. All right, now to install VMware tools, it's really simple. A lot of people mess this up. The same thing goes with VirtualBox. So what you want to do is, all right, you want to go into VM, all right, in the toolbar right up here. Just go to VM and hit install VMware tools. All right, now once you hit that, it's going to load. The live ISO that contains VMware tools, and you have the option to open with files, or if you don't get that option, it's going to be on your desktop. It's going to be this disk. So it's a virtual, it's an ISO file. So just double click on it. All right, and it's going to give you a couple of files. Now, most people would do everything in here. Don't do that. I want you to copy the VMware tools, the version that is given you in there, the tar.gz. You want to move it to your desktop. That's where I would recommend you move it to. All right. So once you've moved it, you then want to extract it. So right click and extract it here. Again, give it a few seconds to extract. All right. So once that's done, you want to open that folder. All right. The VMware tools folder. Let me just drag this right here. So VMware tools. Now in that folder, you're going to find your standard stuff, and we have the installation. So you want to run this with the terminal. So I'm going to right click in the folder and open a terminal, and there we are. So we can bring the terminal in here, and let me just minimize that and we can view. Let me just zoom in so you guys can see what's on the terminal. Now if I list the files, you can see that we have the install.perl. all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit perl VMware and install.pl. Once I hit that, it's going to start the installation process for VMware tools. So it's going to ask me, do I want to install the binary files? Yes, I do. In which directory do you want to install them? The binary files are stored in the binary folder. The initialize directories are stored in the etc folder, correct? What is the directory that contains the RC? Yes, they are in the etc folder. And then it's going to ask you for the initializing scripts, which are also found in that subdirectory. Do you want to install the daemon files? Yes. Do you want to install library files? Yes. So it's going to ask you the path VMware tool does not currently exist. The program is going to create it. Yes, I want to create it. So I'm going to hit yes. All right. Shouldn't take too much time to move to the next step. It's creating the VMware tools library. Okay. Just give it a few seconds. Shouldn't take too much time at all. This is quite simply one of the easiest things that you can do. And once you do this, you can run Kali Linux perfectly on a virtual machine or a virtualized environment. All right, so it's going to ask you in which directory do you want to install the common agent library files. Yes, that is correct. Everything should be just as default unless you've configured your bootloader differently, or you've configured your partitions differently. Do I need to install the documentation files? Yes. The path does not exist currently. Yes, we want to create it. All right. Yes, I want to invoke the command to configure it. All right. So it's going to start initializing. All right. So let it just start that up, and we should be moving right along. Again, it shouldn't take too much time, probably because I'm running this in a virtualized environment. You wouldn't have to do this if you're installing this on your physical computer. VMware host allows shared folders. This is if you want something like Fusion, or if you use the Parallels workstation, you essentially can copy files from, like, let's say Windows to inside your virtual machine. So if I was to copy something on the clipboard of virtual machine and I wanted to paste it in my host operating system, I could do that. So that's very helpful. I'll say yes, I want to do that. VM block enables dragging and copying of files. Yes. Do I want to enable this feature? Yes, I do. Do I want to enable the automatic kernel modules? Yes. Now, one of the things I wanted to tell you is you do not need to prepare the kernel headers like you would need to do. We will get into that when we'll be trying to install the NVIDIA and the AMD drivers. Do you want to enable guest authentication? Yeah, no problem. We don't need to change anything there. You want to enable common agent? Yes. All right. So it's going to start, loading the initializing scripts for the kernel. Again, you don't have to, change the kernel headers. All right. There we are. It shouldn't take too much time now. Give it a few seconds and we should be good. Once that's done, you can probably, you can run it in full screen or the way in exclusive mode, which essentially makes the whole operating system like it's running Kali Linux. All right, so there we are. Again, it's going to tell you to enable the advanced features. Example, guest resolution, fit, drag and drop. You have to manually start the VMware user, log out and log back into your desktop session, restart your session, blah, blah, blah. So let's see if this works right out of the box or I have to log out. So I'm just going to go into view and full screen. And yes, I do have to log out because it is not opened in exclusive mode. All right, so let me just go back to view and exit full screen. And let me just log out like so. Root and log out. There we are. And shouldn't take too much time because we have installed the VMware tools. Again, for advanced features, you just have to start the VMware agent. That is, kid stuff, nothing hard there. All right, so let's open up. So root, enter my password and in we go. Now, essentially, if I've installed the VMware tools correctly, it should be running perfectly now with VMware. Kali Linux should be, almost like the brother to VMware right now. So let this load up and we can test that immediately by seeing if we can run it in full screen and exclusive mode. That's one of the easiest ways to tell if your virtual machine tools or your virtual machine tools have been installed. So I'm going to go into view and full screen. And there we are. As you can see, I don't have any borders and the resolution has fit to my screen. Don't worry if you get these different, artifacting on the screen, they should disappear in a few seconds. There we are. So it has adapted to the resolution and I'm running Kali Linux perfectly. All right. That's going to be it for this video, guys. I know it's quite a long video, but I wanted to give you guys a comprehensive guide on how to go about installing Kali Linux on VMware. Again, I'll be doing guides on the different virtual machine softwares or the virtualization softwares, or should I say. And I'm also going to be making guides on how to install it on your physical machine, because many people seem to be, wanting to know how to do it correctly. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you found value in this video or you enjoyed it, please leave a like down below. If you have any comments or, suggestions or questions, leave them in the comment section down below, or you can hit me up on my social networks. If you have any personalized questions, hit me up on Kick. For the latest hacking news and resources, check out my website. There's a lot of cool stuff there now. And again, make sure to check out our sponsor for the video, which is PureVPN. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll be seeing you in the next video.